Presentation. Welcome, everyone. A few housekeeping items. So everybody's going to remain on mute until we open up for questions. You can utilize the chat to ask us questions. If you have very specific questions or very specific projects, we would love all the details about those questions via email. You can send them to submissions@baltimorecivicfund.org and just let us know it's for this grant program. The presentation will be recorded and we will post it to the website. And the slides will be shared with everybody who registered. We also have an FAQ, and any questions that we get from the group today or through that email that are general enough to be posted to the FAQ will be added to the FAQ throughout the grant RFA period. Are we recording? I feel like we're not.
We are. I started a recording.
Okay,
Thanks for checking.
So for the agenda, we've already done introductions. You now know us. I'll tell you guys a little bit about Baltimore Civic Fund and what we do. We'll talk more in depth about the grant program, an overview. We'll talk about the eligibility section, what you need to apply, the application process, the templates that are used in the application process, and then next steps and resources. And we'll have Q&A throughout the session. So, the Civic Fund. We are a 501c3 organization that was established in 1981 to support the mayor's priorities. So whichever mayor that is, we utilize, or they utilize us as a fiscal sponsor for city programs. Our mission is to enhance the quality of life for Baltimore residents. And we do that with grant making, fiscal projects, and other programs with city agencies. Those are our clients. And I'll pass it over for an overview of the grants.
Yep. Thank you. So the Baltimore City Critical Area Management Program, which is often referred to as the CAMP manual. So from here on out, I'll probably be referring it to as CAMP. As well as the Forest Conservation Program, receive one-time fee in lieu payments from developments across the city that are unable to meet their requirements through plantings or stormwater best management practices. So these payments are the funding mechanism behind this environmental offset grant program. Next slide. So essentially, both regulations require mitigation when land is disturbed or trees or other natural resources are impacted. And this is to foster more environmentally sensitive development. In the critical area, mitigation can be met on site through plantings or stormwater BMPs, as well as removing impervious surfaces. And forest conservation mitigation can be met through tree and forest planting. When the mitigation requirements cannot be met on site or off site, developers can pay into the offset fee fund, which is managed by the Department of Planning. We are then required within the Department of Planning to distribute these funds through the city through projects that meet the original intent of the two regulations. Next slide, please. So projects should align with goals outlined in the critical area and forest conservation requirements. We also encourage projects that align with or contribute to the goal in adopted plans, such as the comprehensive plan, the sustainability plan, as well as others. Projects that contribute to priority programs and initiatives like Baltimore Green Network and Inspire programs are also encouraged. We also have more information on our website about that. Environmental offset grants cannot support projects that are proposed by ineligible organizations, projects that involve activities outside of Baltimore City, or projects that involve discriminatory activities. Also, any expense that are not directly related to the environmental benefit of the project will not be funded. It should also be noted that if you are using these grants or you would like to use this money as a development payment or for development, that is not eligible as well. Next slide, please. So these are one-year grants. They are ranging from $5,000 to $75,000. They will be funded via 2 disbursements, so one in the beginning and one at the end after the final report. We are granting just at $550,000 in total funding. And essentially the grant reporting is just a final report as well as meeting with the Office of Sustainability, that includes Rachel and myself during the grant process. Next slide. So we are in that second table here, or second column, information session. The applications will close on January 17th. We anticipate updating applicants on the status of their submission in mid-March, and then the first payment will be awarded. March 2026 is when the grant period ends, and the grantees will be required to submit the final reports, and final payments will then be issued. And I will pass it back to Raven.
Can we pause here for questions?
Yes. So I guess if we would like to unmute. Oh, I guess, can we allow unmute? I don't want to unmute everyone.
Yeah, I just allowed folks.
Okay.
So if you have any questions at this point, please unmute yourself and ask them, or you can put them in the chat and we'll read them.
Okay, hearing none, I'm gonna move on.
So it looks like we have a few in the chat actually.
I can't see the chat right now.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go.
Oh, I see them coming now. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and sorry, I'm not sure what's going on with the mute, but thank you all for being flexible and for putting your questions in the chat. So we can sort of start at the top. I see there's a question from Carrie about projects that are ineligible for development. So what Grace means by that is that because we are overseeing regulations associated with development, we are not able to fund projects that would be related to a project that we would regulate. So for instance, if you're a church and interested in developing stormwater management, we wouldn't be able to pay for the plantings for that project because that would be something that we would review as part of our regulations. So that's sort of what that ineligibility means. And then Grace, do you want to take the next question?
Yeah.
If you can see them.
Yes, I can. So the question is, funds can go to projects that are not within the critical area, but somehow demonstrate that they will support the mission of those 2 programs. So essentially, it can be critical area or forest conservation programs. Your project doesn't have to necessarily meet both requirements because stormwater is strictly critical area. But as long as it supports one of those missions, that is acceptable.
Okay, and then the next question is related, or I'll just read. So looking at the RFA, I see that Southwest Baltimore is not included in the community development impact investment areas listed in the RFA. What is the reasoning behind this? Will applications from this area be considered? So I will actually be getting into this a little bit later in the presentation. We'll talk about the different program questions and the areas that we'll be evaluating applications in. The short answer is that absolutely, yes, applications from the area will still be considered. We just have ways of prioritizing applications. But again, I'll talk about this more later. And then I think Michael had a question that's sort of related to the critical area question that came with Grace.
Yeah, I only saw those 2 questions from Yuri and Michael. Was the one I addressed, but I'm not sure if there was another. I don't see another in here. It could have just been sent to you, Rachel, instead of everyone.
Yes. Okay. I think that's correct. So one of the questions was whether projects have to be within the critical area. And the answer to that is no. They can be anywhere in Baltimore City, but they do have to be within Baltimore.
Yeah. And that goes for critical area funds as well. The critical area can fund projects outside of the critical area. And forest conservation as well, of course.
And then there is another question about how forest versus pollinator-friendly plants and shrubs is defined. So that sort of gets into the definitions associated with our regulations. So I am the Forest Conservation Program Manager, so I regulate forests, and our Baltimore City Code has a pretty strict definition of what a forest is. But because we're using both critical area funds and forest conservation funds, we're often able to fund a pretty broad range of different types of projects by sort of pulling funds from our different sources depending on what the use of the funds will be. So, but we can definitely answer that question in a little bit more detail because I think it deserves a little bit more of a specific answer than what I just gave. But
Okay.
There are a few more questions. I'm wondering if we should maybe try and get through the rest of this and then circle back to some of the remaining questions, because I think parts of them we'll get into as we keep going.
Okay. So eligibility. There are certain things that are required for your application to us. You must be a nonprofit. You don't have to be a 501c3 specifically. You can be a C6, C4, whatever the other numbers are. But you do have to provide proof of that status with a copy of your determination letter from the IRS. Again, you must be servicing Baltimore City. You should be located in Baltimore City. These are funds for the city. So in the application, it asks for your organization's address, and you can provide any one of these items to tell us where you're located. Good standing. You must be in a good standing with the state of Baltimore, or excuse me, with the state of Maryland. On the Department of Assessments and Taxation website, you can go there, type in your name, and get a certificate or a screenshot or a PDF of the standing of your organization. And it's linked here if you need it. For financials, we follow the state law. So if your organization has charitable contributions of less than $300,000, we require you to submit your most recent IRS 990 filing or an independent audit if you have one. For organizations with charitable contributions between $300,000 and $750,000, we require a financial statement that is audited or reviewed by a CPA. And finally, for organizations with contributions over $750,000, we require an independent audit prepared by a CPA. For the application, it is all online. There isn't any other way to submit your application. It's all online. We use Submittable, which is a widely used grant making platform. So if you already have an account, you simply sign in and go to our specific link here, and it'll pull up the application. If you don't, you will just simply toggle over to the sign up button shown here and enter your information and create an account so that you can use Submittable. You can view the application without submitting anything. You can scroll up and down, look it over, print it, PDF it, whatever you want to do, without actually submitting it. It also automatically saves if you start entering information. It'll save it every time you change something. So that is useful. On the application, there's some organizational information that we request. Obviously, your organization name, the address, the proof of operating address, if it is different from your IRS determination letter. So, some people started their organization in some other county, some other place, and it doesn't have to match. We just want to see your IRS determination letter for the designation of being a nonprofit, and then where you are actually located in the city. And then, of course, your certificate of good standing. Again, that could be a screenshot or a PDF version. You don't have to have the paid version. And your IRS 990 or audit. We do allow for organizations to have a fiscal sponsor. So if you are applying with a fiscal sponsor, the column on the left is your information as the organization who is going to be doing the project. So similar to the last one, your name, your address, your proof of operating address. You would answer all the program narrative questions and complete all the templates, and then your organization would sign the application. And then the fiscal sponsor would provide a fiscal sponsor agreement. It should be signed, it should be dated, it should have all the details of what your agreement looks like with your fiscal sponsor. It should be the fiscal sponsor's IRS determination letter, their independent audit or 990, and their good standing with the state of Maryland.
Okay, thanks, Irvin. And so I'm going to talk a little bit more specifically about the meat of the application. So this, as I alluded to before, these are some of the questions that we're really going to be evaluating the applications based on. And so the first of the program questions is a project description. So this is relatively self-explanatory, but should be a basic description of what you're planning to do with your project. And should make sure that it's meeting some of those overall goals that Grace went over earlier in sort of the grants overview. An important part of this too, which I saw someone actually had a question about this, is related to site control. So we want to make sure that anyone who's proposing work under this grant program either has control or ownership of the land that they're doing work on, or has permission from the property owners, and will need to see some documentation of that permission. And so that's sort of all kind of under the project description, project background part. And then the next program question is related to benefits. So this goes back to the regulations that we are required to meet, and the ways in which these fee in lieu monies, the funds are controlled. So we're looking for quantifiable benefits associated with the projects that you're proposing, things like the number of trees planted, the square feet of asphalt removed, or the square feet of a stormwater management facility that's installed. And this, again, is all information that we then need to report back to the state based on our regulations. But for us, we're also interested in understanding the qualitative benefits associated with the projects that you're doing. So if you've proposed previous projects that you've seen, an increase in a feeling of community belonging or things like that, that's definitely also of great interest to me, or to us, and it helps us understand the full impact of our projects and not just the things that we need to report elsewhere. The next program question is related to engagement. So this is the number of city residents that you're planning to engage with your project. This can be through a number of different means, through community outreach, through volunteer work or volunteer hours, through education campaigns or training campaigns. Those are all sorts of things that our grants can cover, and all different ways to engage the community. The next program question is related to partnerships. So if you are planning to engage with any governmental or other institutional partners in your project, we're really interested in that. So that could be partnering with a local school, partnering with the Rec and Parks Department, with other community associations, anything like that. And we'd like to know why you're planning to engage in that partnership and also how that will work. And then the next program question is related to long-term sustainability. So for this, we're just interested in what the overall environmental and financial sustainability and plan is for the project. So in 5 years, will it be maintained, or will it sort of been neglected? We're just interested in understanding what the long-term plan is for the site and for the project itself. And then next slide. And then the final program question that we're looking at is equity. And there are a few different ways in which our application gets at this question of equity. And so this goes back to that question we got about the impact investment areas. So we are prioritizing applications from an equity perspective based on 2 major criteria. So whether they're located in an impact investment area or whether they are undertaken by or partnering with an emerging organization. So impact investment areas are areas that DHCD has identified as areas that are great areas for investment, for targeted investment, because there are near-term opportunities for growth. And as you can see, they're outlined in this map. This is a part of the application. And our RFA also has links to the reference documents where this designation comes from. And then emerging organizations. So these are organizations that are either centered in or have work centered in communities that have historically been underfunded or have lacked access to capital. And again, there's a little bit more information in our RFA about emerging organizations as well. So those are sort of the 2 prioritization parts of equity, but then we also have another question that's a little more project specific. And there are some guiding questions in the application to consider when you're thinking about how your project might be equitable and might have impacts on greater Baltimore City equity. Some of the guiding questions are things like, are project leaders Black-led organizations or BIPOC organizations? And if the project is expanding access to green resources, including tree canopy or parks or things like that in areas that have historically been removed from those resources. So those are sort of, a lot of different ways in which we're thinking about equity in the application. And next slide.
And we'll pause again here for questions.
So we can try again to see if people can unmute themselves. So let me see if that worked. Okay. This will be the test. Is anyone able to come off mute? What if I... Nope. All right. Let me see if I try this. Yeah, I'm still seeing that lock symbol on
Yeah.
All right. Well, we will just keep reading these questions. Thank you all again for your flexibility. I see there's a question about, so can the applicant be located outside of the impact investment area but work with residents inside the impact investment area? So if the project proposal is located within the impact investment area, then that's sort of what we're more interested in than where the organization might be centered in. We're sort of, we're thinking about how the funds themselves will be distributed equitably. And then, so there's another question. Do you have a specific number in mind for square feet or number of plants? Not really. I mean, I think we're offering a pretty wide range of grant funds from 5,000 all the way to 75,000, in part because we understand that, not every project will be able to achieve the same quantifiable results. So we're really open to different types of projects and different scales of projects, but we're more interested in the overall goal of the project and those equity considerations and partnerships and things like that. I don't know, Grace, you wanna jump in on some of these?
Yeah, sorry, I did see that I can unmute people. So if you want to come off mute, please raise your hand. You should be able to have that function, and then I can request to unmute you. Sorry, it's a little unconventional. WebEx is kind of new for us. Okay, did you answer the forest versus pollinator friendly plants?
Sort of. I took a stab at it.
Okay, yeah, from a critical area perspective, with pollinator-friendly plants and shrubs, as long as they're native, I believe those would be funded. I'm sorry, I was looking into how to unmute people. Did you talk about any previous projects?
No, I didn't. If you would,
Okay.
if you want to go into that.
Yeah, so previous projects, from our understanding, so Rachel and I have not led this before, so this was before we joined the city. But a lot of those pertain to tree plantings around the city, educational trainings related to environmental work, pollinator and tree garden enhancements. I believe there was water quality work done, and as well as like oysters, oyster restoration or oyster castles, some basic projects like that. Have been
Yeah.
implemented throughout the city, at least in the last grant program. But like
And
I
I
said, that
can-
was before our time. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, no, just to add to that, in the FAQ that I think Raven will talk about a little later, there is one of the questions that's already sort of been pre-populated is this, like, is sort of a walkthrough of different types of projects, different types of organizations that have applied and the work that they've undertaken. So hopefully that provides a little more guidance too.
Yeah. I see the question about specific number in mind for square feet or number of plants. As of right now, we don't have that number in mind. I will say that the critical area management plan has certain criteria for what is credited in development projects, but that doesn't necessarily pertain to here. But definitely we would like to see native plants, big one, and then typically 2-inch caliber trees are credited under critical area requirements. So I imagine we would like to see something like that, but we don't have a specific number. Would you like to take the next one, Rachel?
Yeah. Sorry, I'm just scrolling back to make sure that we got all the questions that we sort of skipped before. So proposals can span across neighborhoods. In the application, we sort of have asked folks to identify a primary neighborhood if that's applicable to your project, but then there's an option to add other addresses or other zip codes that the project might span across, understanding that, yeah, tree planting on city streets is not sequestered to one specific part of the city. And so it's definitely okay to span across different neighborhoods. And then I see there's another question about a written maintenance plan for planting projects. As of now, we don't require a written maintenance plan. It may be something that we think about in the future. I know it's something we've talked about, but it's not part of our current final reporting documentation or applicant documentation.
Rachel, did you touch on that impact investment area? You did, okay.
I did. Mm-hmm.
And then the last question I see here is about site visits before or during the application review process. I don't believe we require that right now. Of course, if you would like us to come out and do a site visit, that is perfectly acceptable, but not required.
Yeah, the one requirement that we do have is a meeting at some point during the grant award process. And that can either be a site visit or a Teams call, depending on sort of how much support the applicant needs or wants, and how much we would like to be involved. So, and then I see there's one more question that I want to get to, and then maybe we can move on to the templates part of the presentation. There's a question about if you are working on vacant lots that are owned by the mayor and city council, can you assume that you have permission to do the work, or do you need to get this? And if you do need to get permission, who do you contact? So I don't believe that you should assume that you will have permission to do that work. And we can probably help with understanding who to contact. My guess is that the land would probably be owned by DHCD. And so we can try and sort of identify who within the agency would be a good person to reach out to for that. And if you, Jerry, I think you answered you asked the question, if you would like to reach out to us, we'll provide our contact information later, and you're welcome to do so.
I don't see any questions in the general chat. I think you've been getting some, Rachel, on the side. But it does not look like anyone has their hand raised at this time. So I guess we can continue.
Okay.
Unless Rachel, did you have any more questions in your chat?
I don't think so, but I'll look through them to make sure.
Okay.
And we can get to them later.
Okay.
Okay, so as I mentioned, there are a couple of templates too for this application process. They are linked here. They are linked in the application. A couple of times in the application, you really can't miss them. So there's two. There's a timeline template and a budget template. And they are in a read-only mode. So when you open it up in Excel, in an online version of Excel, you won't be able to like click through or add anything to it until you download a copy. So this slide is just showing you how to do that. You'll just go to File, Save As, and download a copy, and then you'll be able to get the version that you should fill out and then re-upload into the application. This is the timeline template. It is a basic Gantt chart that will start in April of 2025. And you should, under the description of activities, you should list out all of the items that you'll need to do in order to achieve the goals of your project, all the different milestones, whatever they may be. So there's a few examples here. And then check the box for how long in weeks it'll take to do that task. So here, hire a program manager, or coordinator, they selected 4 weeks. Buying laptops, a couple of weeks. Signing MOUs, another couple of weeks. So you'll just fill in accordingly for your project. The second template is a budget template. This is arguably the most important template, and it needs to be filled out correctly. So the eligible expenses on that, expense categories, I should say, are here. Contractor and professional fees, materials, staff costs and personnel, stipends, and supplies. And so on this budget sheet, you will fill in the type of expense. It'll be a drop-down menu. So you'll pick the category from one of those categories that I mentioned, and then explain. So contractor and professional fees, it could be, the contractor who's planting for you. It can be a landscaper, whatever. The organization, person, or group that is providing the service to you, you'll give a little more detail about that in the expense category. Expense summary, excuse me, and then tell us the amount total that you are requesting, the number of items, and then any match that you have, you'll add in these columns here. And then the source of match, of course, and whether the match you have is pending or secured. And then in the final column is the description. So we don't have a question that is specifically a narrative about the budget. So the detail for your line items needs to be here. So you can use as much or as little description as you want, but this is For the panel reviewers, this is the only information they will receive about the budget line items. So you'll want to be very clear and concise here in the description. So after the applications are received, we at Civic Fund do a technical review, and the technical review is to determine eligibility and the completeness of your application. So again, if you, for some reason, didn't complete the template, the budget template, or you neglected the description section of your budget template, we will review those items and then request that you update them. So anything that might automatically disqualify you from going further into the process, we will give you an opportunity to fix that thing or whatever those things are. Typically, the time is about 5 business days. Normally, we give you the weekend too. So if you have questions about what you need to update, obviously we're available Monday through Friday to answer those questions. And then you'll have through the weekend to complete those. And then the following week, we will close it, and whatever was submitted or re-uploaded is what we will use to determine if you are going on to the panel review. So there's only one opportunity. We will give you explicit details about what is needed to be updated or redone, and you'll have one opportunity to redo that. On the panel review, so everybody who makes it through the cure and updates their application and does everything great, we'll move you on to the panel, and they will use a rubric that we've created to score your actual narrative responses and review your templates. We do have some technical assistance for you. As I mentioned earlier, if you have any specific questions about the application, about your project, about how to use Submittable, whatever your question is, you can submit to us at submissions@baltimorecivicfund.org. You can also email Grace and Rachel. And then we will also regularly update our FAQ, which is already posted on our website. And it'll be updated with all of the questions that we received from you all during the grant period. And that is that. I will pause here for more questions.
So Raven, there is a question in the chat about the templates. Chris asked if you can go over again how to access them.
Sure. So the templates are in the application. They are linked in the application. Whenever there is a question with a template, there's only 2. The question has a link in it to the template itself. And when you open up the template, it'll be in a read-only format. You just go to File, Save As, and download a copy. It is also linked in this presentation, which will be emailed to you. So you will have 2 ways to get to it, at least 2 ways.
I wanted to quickly clarify a question that I had answered earlier, and I think I would just like to add a little bit more context to the answer. So there's a question about what the for development ineligibility means, and like I said, it sort of just means that any project that's already being reviewed for our regulations, you can't use these funds to meet the regulations. So essentially, if the work is voluntary it's okay if the work is non-voluntary and is being required by some sort of state regulation through Grace and I and the Office of Sustainability, then it's not okay. And so one potential example of that is if a developer is requesting funds to plant trees in a plaza that was part of a project subject to critical area review. So if I think the previous example I provided was a church doing stormwater management. So if that work is happening voluntarily, then we can provide funds to assist with that work. It's just whether it's sort of a voluntary project or an involuntary or non-voluntary planting. So hopefully that clarifies. And if you have any more questions about that, please let us know.
Other questions?
Raven, there's another question about the templates. Victor asked which questions on the application are or have the templates, are the templates. They just scrolled through and did not see any links.
If you're scrolling through and you're not selecting certain questions, the other questions don't come up. So you do actually have to select, there's specific questions that you do have to select that will make other questions appear. And you have to select them correctly. And that's on purpose. We want people to fill out the application correctly. And if you don't have the tools you need to actually fully apply, so like if you don't have site control or permission to use a site, you will stop and you won't be able to complete the application at all, because we don't want people to waste their time if they are automatically ineligible. So if you did that, you probably didn't click anything and you didn't get those questions. But the questions are exactly what they say. Timeline. Project timeline is the name of the question. Project budget is the name of the question, and they are in there.
Thanks, Raven. Yeah, and Grace just put this in the chat, but just as a sort of frequently asked question that we've gotten, ineligible expenses. So in the, I believe it was, I can't remember if it was the timeline template or the budget template, it listed purchasing laptops as one of the steps. So that is actually an ineligible expense under our program, but is something that, you know, the Civic Fund has funded under other programs. But a few examples of some ineligible expenses or activities are printing materials and providing snacks or t-shirts for volunteers. So those are a couple things that we cannot fund under this grant program.
There is a chat from Carrie. This might be a good question for you, Raven. Is there a PDF with all the grant questions and templates with word or character limits?
There's not a PDF with all the grant questions. It's only the online version. It does tell you the word or character limit on it. It's a word limit. It's 250 for most of the narrative questions.
That might be something that we could put together if there's sort of an access concern with we do request that you submit the application online. That's where we're processing all the applications. But if you want to reach out to us, we might be able to sort of pull a PDF together with application questions.
Oh, if you are working on an application like with a group, there's an option to all of you to work in the application together. So if you have someone working on your financial information and someone else working on the program and narrative information, you can do that together in a collaborative way. You just whoever I guess starts the application can invite everyone else to be a collaborator. I would say the person who is going to submit at the end should be that person and then invite everybody else.
Also, if anyone posted a question in the chat earlier and didn't get an answer, please feel free to put it in the chat again or raise your hand. I think we got to all of them, but you know, we may have missed a few. So,
does WebEx give you a transcript of the chat?
I believe so. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we should be able to get a transcript because we will put all of the questions that were here in the chat on the FAQ or some general version of them if they were specific.
Great.
Well, if there are no more questions at the moment, this is our website. This is where all of the information is. This is where the RFA lives. This is where the FAQ lives. And this is where we will post the recording of this session. Thank you all for joining us.